Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great, as I always say. And in this video, I got some stories from the graveyard shift, or night shift, or whatever you want to call it. Not all of them are supernatural, but they're all pretty scary enough. So, if that sounds like your cup of tea, then definitely pull up a stump, and let's jump into it. Thank you for watching. There was this one time that something weird happened when I was working the night shift at the movie theater in high school. It was 2 a.m., the movies were all ending, and we were about to go home. Suddenly, an old couple come through the doors, all happy and stuff. They're giggling and holding hands and everything. They order ice cream, which I begin to scoop out. They have what must have been a really weird conversation with the girl next to me, because afterwards she's shaken and won't talk to anyone. They pay me for the ice cream, and they walk back out the front door. The manager walks up and he says, "Guys, that door was locked for a reason. Don't let anyone in here past 12:15. So I go up to check the doors and make sure they're still locked, and they are. I have no idea how that couple came in. So I work in security, and I've definitely had some weird stuff happen. I was doing an overnight shift in the absolute middle of nowhere. It's a movie company that is filming stuff out in here during the day, and I watch the trailers and the equipment at night. The producer shows me around the area that I'm supposed to watch. There's an old barn that's about half a mile from the house that they're storing stuff in. The crew is still unloading, and I'm just kind of walking around, meeting and greeting everybody just so I get a good gauge over who's supposed to be here and who's not. So everyone is now starting to leave as it's starting to get dark. So I do my first round, and I'm at the old barn. I get to the very back, and something catches my eye, and I spin around. I walk towards what looks like something in the corner, and I shit you not, there is an old man that has to be 90 years old, crouched in the corner, with his arms crossed like he's in a casket. I say, "Yo, this is private property, you can't be here." This guy slowly stands up and doesn't say anything. I repeat myself again that this is private property and he's not supposed to be here, and there's still no response. Finally, he starts walking backwards toward the road. I see the producer is still here, so I go over and tell her what happened, and she says, "What old man?" And then he walks by us, crosses the road, enters a field about a mile big, before walking straight into the woods, all while walking backwards. It's at least 10 p.m. and snowing, and it's pitch black outside, and this freaky old man or thing just walked into the woods. We all just stood there and watched him disappear. We never saw him again. And the movie, if you were wondering, that I was working on was called Abundant Acreage. So I worked thirds in security, and a guy that I work with at a post on the weekends told me about this old factory that he used to guard for another company. Apparently, people would always get in, and he'd been jumped a few times. Everyone else he worked with was terrified of going into the building alone. He also said on occasion that the guards would be going through the building and pass by the cameras, only for it to pick up somebody stalking them from behind, walking really quietly so the guard wouldn't hear them. They were never attacked or anything. It's just extremely unsettling to know that somebody was 10 feet behind you, stalking you, and you never know. In 2014, I really needed a job, so I took a job at the local grocery store. It was a night stalker job. The work was from 10 to 11 p.m. to 6 or 7 in the morning. You would go aisle by aisle and refill the shelves. It wasn't too hard, just time consuming. The place was always super eerie because in the morning I was mostly always alone, and some of the lights would be turned off, but again, I really needed the money. I started to notice weird stuff, like finding one can of something lying in the middle of an aisle that no one's been in, finding freezer doors that just hang open by themselves and then shut, lights turning off and on all the time, even weird noises in the aisles. Even though this is happening in aisles that the other worker isn't in, I figure that he's doing something to freak me out. After a couple of days, I confront him about it while taking a break. He laughs and says that he knew I'd ask about it. He says that it's not him, and shit like that happens. It's best to not think about it. The guy I replaced quit because one time when he was stalking, there was somebody watching him from the end of the aisle one night. I never felt comfortable there ever again. I quit 2 weeks later because I found a different job, but I'd be lying if I said that all the stuff happening didn't make it easier to walk away. Now this is something I actually have experience in because I used to work night shift at a grocery store, and a lot of times nothing would happen, but sometimes it's the same thing in that story. Freezer doors would open and close on their own. Random lights would turn off and on by themselves. I remember one day the store alarm went off when I was there by myself. There was nobody else there, nobody in the parking lot, and everything was locked. I don't know what happened, but it was, obviously it's all quiet in the store and stuff, and all of a sudden the siren blares out. Scared the shit right out of me. But this one time, it's just a thing that comes to mind. So we had a sign out front of our store where we had letters and stuff, like those wooden signs that you would put like the yellow letters in. And we had one of those for like sales and stuff. We'd advertise 4 products, usually related to each other, 2 on one side, 2 on the other. And we used to keep the letters in this back room on the upstairs of the store. And that back room was really creepy in itself because it was so quiet back there and it felt completely disconnected from reality kind of thing. But this one time, I remember I was putting the letters back from the previous few weeks because whoever had taken the sign down before just would throw the letters up in the room and not put them away. Kind of happens a lot. But when I was putting them away, sorting through them and stuff, doing that tedious task, I hear a conversation coming up the hallway. And I think that it's like maybe one of the cashiers and the manager or something. But then I hear the contents of the conversation. They were talking about getting a job at a mill, and they were saying like, oh, it's a really good wage. It's $10 an hour. And I remember when that mill used to pay $10 an hour, and it must have been 1991, 1992, when they paid every 2 weeks, I think. So I don't know what happened that night, and I went down and asked all the cashiers if they were up there, and the manager wasn't there. The cashiers hadn't been up there because the store was kind of busy during that time. So yeah, I heard a conversation from 1991 or 1992, before I was even born. But I didn't really feel scared by it. It was just really super eerie. And I do remember sometimes the carts would come undone by themselves, but that just kind of happens when you are in a place that has hundreds of people going in and out of it at all times. Eventually something's going to get left over there. That's my opinion anyways. But yeah, back to the rest of these stories. So after I was done in the army, I started managing a convenience store. I was working the overnight shift because somebody called off. I was pretty pissed because the stuff in our cooler keeps seemingly moving, and I'm pretty sure that I'm losing my mind. I'm making coffee at around 3 a.m. when I hear someone behind me say, "It's cold outside." I chuckle and say, "I know, right?" And I turn around to face who it was. There was no one there, and I realized that the doorbell hadn't rung at all. I say screw it, and I finish the rest of my shift outside smoking. I never worked overnight again. Other than things like that, it's not super scary, not compared to my time in the military, but it's pretty nice. My only problem is that the store itself is just kind of off. You'll see this blonde kid walking around sometimes when you're alone, be it day or night, and the sodas in the cooler always switch themselves. It's really weird. This place doesn't have a history of any deaths or anything like that I know of. It's just an odd place to be alone in. Luckily though, I work days unless I have to cover a shift, so I'm never alone anymore. The third shift always tells me stories though. Sometimes the second shift if it's slow. Actually, now that I'm talking about it, one I can think of that is similar to mine, and the third shift person told me this. They ended up talking to this blonde kid. She didn't really think it was a ghost when she started telling me about him. She said she was working when this blonde teen came up to her and was asking weird questions about the old country store that was here like 50 years ago. She was trying to tell him that she wasn't even born when it was here, and asked him if he was doing a report on it or something for school, and he gave her a weird look and walked off to the candy. She turned back to break down the cappuccino machine to clean it, and when she looked up, he had vanished. She asked me to check the doorbell because it hadn't worked that night, but according to her, she was the only one there. I didn't have the camera codes at the time because I was just a cashier, but it sounded a lot like what I had been seeing in the corner of my eye for a while. It was after that my third shift experience occurred. Outside of that, it's just the sodas moving around and seeing that blonde kid randomly out of the corners of your eyes. Oh, and sometimes, aside from my experience, you'll hear random quotes about the weather. Our second shift hears that usually. So my parents bought a place in Lake District. They want to turn it into an activity center for kids. The building is super old and used to be an old sanatorium for people with TB. I think it was built there because there was something to do with the fresh air. The building was proper knackered, not lived in or done anything with for years. There was old beds and stuff still out in the barn. My parents want to turn the upstairs into dorms for kids on school trips. So, this one Christmas, me and my dad are locking the place up. It's late in the afternoon, but dark because, it is December after all. So we're stripping up some carpets in one of the dorm rooms below the attic to decorate. We hear some rough coughing. I shout down the hall to make sure my dad's okay. He says it wasn't him, and he thought it was me. And I think, what the hell? So I go out and I'm standing in the hall, and I can still hear coughing, like ragged coughing, coming from the attic. My dad comes out, and we both look up at the attic and think, what the F is going on? There's a lot of scuffling from the attic as well, wheels rolling across the boards, and people walking. So he pulls down the trap door, and Dad makes me go up, and I'm thinking, oh great, I'm gonna die up here. So I go up and I pull the light, and there's nothing up there. All that's there is this weird wooden train that has a string tied to it in the middle of the floor that looks super old. So I climb back down and I just leave it be. Sometimes you can still hear the ragged coughing. This happened back when I was in Airforce basic training. I had to do some security shift at midnight. The duties for this include checking the dormitory for accountability, reporting the number of trainees currently in the dormitory, the current dorm room temperature, and the bathrooms and the day room and all that stuff. So I'm walking through the dormitory by myself doing accountability. One girl suddenly sits up and stares straight ahead, her eyes wide open. When I get to her, I whisper for her to go back to sleep. She's still sitting up, and then she slowly turns her head towards me. I get super weirded out, and the other girl on shift with me is back and asks what's going on. The other girl goes back to sleep. We look at each other and continue on with our duties. The next day, the girl says she saw something staring at her from across her bed, but felt like she couldn't control herself. We casually mentioned that she was sitting up in her bed, eyes wide open for a long time. And by the time that we were graduating from basic training, there was a girl who lost her shit completely, and all of my sisters from flight had to take turns watching her at night. They pretty much said that she acted like she was possessed. It was really creepy. She kept smearing blood on everything and growling. And for me, something super creepy was that everybody said that we looked similar. So, I don't know. I was always worried that something was going to happen to me when I was around her. In 2014, Hurricane Arthur knocked out the power to most of my province. Over about 2 weeks, everything was back to normal, but during that time when all the power was out, I worked at a shower station. The old high school where I live managed to get power back before lots of the places in the area, so we set up a shower station where people could come, get a shower, use the Wi-Fi, make phone calls, etc. I was there until 10:30 p.m. this particular night, so not super graveyard, but like still late enough. I was sitting in the lobby area of this high school with a laptop, keeping myself busy, during the period between people coming in for various reasons. When the nighttime came, this was July, so it was around 9 p.m., and things weren't so friendly in this school. I went to this school as a kid and a teenager, and I've had some weird things happen to me during my 8 years there, but this was the farthest thing from my mind at the time. I was watching YouTube compilations of funny videos when I heard one of the doors start to shake. I looked over, and these doors that were locked, closing off the actual 4 wings of the school where the classrooms were. This lobby was a central area between the gym and the rest of the school, and I was the only one in the entire school. I had the keys, and all the alarms were set. But sure enough, the doors were shaking. Then I began to hear whispering and the tapping of footsteps on the concrete floor, and then what sounded like tapping on the glass. This would happen every few minutes before stopping on a dime, and I would be left in silence. When 10:25 came, I took my laptop, made a quick check to see that all the showers were turned off, and I pieced the hell out of there. I swore that when I was getting in my car, after I looked back at the door, I saw a person wearing really old clothes, looking straight at me, smile, and then disappear and back into the darkness. So, what'd you think of those stories? Let me know which one was your favorite one down in the comments. And if you have stories of your own, you can send them to me through the email in the description below. There's also links down there to a PayPal and a Patreon if you want to support the channel that way. And I've told the story on this channel before. This was a family member of mine, my late grandfather, when he used to do night watch at an old mill. He always said that the whole place had a whole different feeling at night. And this particular night, he was doing his rounds, which involved him watching the cameras, and then he'd have to go walk around the entire mill out behind just to make sure that everything was still there and there was nobody there that shouldn't be there. So, this particular night, I don't remember what time of year it was. I may have said in the other story, but, I just kind of forget what time of year it was sometimes. But it was foggy out, and he's going out behind the mill, which was built in the old days when they used to have a log run where people would stand on top of the logs and they would walk them down to down the river to the mill. So when he goes out behind there, he sees a guy standing in a big vest, and he's like, oh, you're not supposed to be here this late at night. And the guy doesn't really acknowledge him. He just says, you can feel it in the air. It's going to be a cold one tomorrow. And then he says again, that's cool and all, but you're not supposed to be here. And then the guy just kind of looks straight ahead and kind of walks off into the fog and disappears. Which, when I think of that, I'm like, yeah, it was most likely supernatural because, it was just the water there, and he's obviously not going to just jump in for a swim. But I think that's something that I would love to do just to screw with somebody, is that I would just disappear into a bunch of fog and leaving them wondered where the hell I went to. I don't know. I think it's funny. But anyways, I will leave you with that, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you for pulling up a stump, and thank you for watching.